Ok. Bonsoir, bonsoir vraiment à tous. Merci d'être ici. Pour un moment que je crois nous attendons tous et nous espérions tous vivre un instant dans notre vie, c'est maintenant, ça va se passer entre nous. C'est une rencontre superbe entre celle qu'on appelle la Dame de Rangoon et puis ceux qui sont ici, c'est-à-dire les étudiants de la Sorbonne, ici, les étudiants de Sciences Po et de l'INALCO, tout cela bien sûr sous le partenariat du ministère des Affaires étrangères. Je vous le dis évidemment et vous le savez, c'est une grande dame que nous recevons ce soir. Rarement une femme à la silhouette aussi gracile aura aussi bien incarné l'esprit de résistance pacifique et de combat aussi pour la démocratie et pour les droits de l'homme. Elle achève ici à Paris, vous le savez aussi, un voyage de 15 jours en Europe qui lui a notamment permis de recevoir son prix Nobel de la paix qu'on lui avait attribué il y a 20 ans. Et de la France, elle a dit il y a 48 heures qu'elle aimait tout, de Victor Hugo à la soupe à l'oignon. Nul doute donc qu'elle aimera ce qui va se passer ici, c'est-à-dire cet échange entre vous et elle. On a fait un petit effort supplémentaire sur la température dans cette salle. Elle est birmane ce soir, cette température. Je vous demande d'accueillir dans cette salle Aung San Suu Kyi. Merci vraiment de cet accueil. Dans quelques instants, le dialogue va bien sûr s'instaurer entre les étudiants qui sont ici et puis ensuite entre vous, la salle et Aung San Suu Kyi qui nous fait le plaisir d'être avec nous. Mais d'abord, un mot d'accueil du recteur de l'Académie de Paris, Patrick Gérard. Et plus qu'un mot d'ailleurs, je crois que c'est un geste.
Madame la ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la Recherche, Monsieur l'ambassadeur aux droits de l'homme, Monsieur le Président de l'ANGZO, Monsieur l'administrateur provisoire de Sciences Po, Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles, Messieurs, votre présence en ces lieux ravive le souffle des grandes célébrations qu'a vécu ce grand amphithéâtre. Le centenaire de la Révolution française en 1889, le jubilé de Louis Pasteur en 1892, la réception du président Wilson en 1919, qui allait peu après recevoir le prix Nobel de la paix, et plus près de nous, en 1996, la réception de Nelson Mandela, lui aussi prix Nobel de la paix. Toutes ces célébrations ont fait battre le cœur de la patrie des droits de l'homme. En cet instant, ce cœur bat à nouveau chaleureusement pour célébrer en Sorbonne la belle alliance de la paix et du savoir. La paix, vous l'incarnez, Madame, vous qui en êtes prix Nobel depuis 1991. À nos yeux, vous symbolisez plus que jamais le combat pour la démocratie dans le monde. Toute votre vie, votre magnifique combat nous rappelle cette belle maxime de Périclès: il n'est point de bonheur sans liberté, ni de liberté sans courage. Votre exemple et votre courage, Madame, expliquent sans aucun doute le formidable engouement de tous les étudiants qui ont répondu en si grand nombre à l'annonce de votre venue. À l'invitation du ministre des Affaires étrangères et avec l'actif soutien de Sciences Po et de Langzhou, ils ont voulu vous dire leur admiration, un peu comme ces jeunes de Birmanie qui ont l'habitude de vous appeler Mother, mère. Pour la communauté universitaire réunie ici avec sa ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur, la paix constitue la grande vocation du savoir. Vous qui êtes aussi docteur, vous savez combien la connaissance et l'esprit critique sont des promesses de liberté. D'autres combats, d'autres recherches ont été menées en ces lieux prestigieux. Je pense en particulier à Marie Curie, première femme professeure en Sorbonne et 2 fois prix Nobel. C'est le même idéal d'humanisme, placé au cœur de l'idée d'université, qui nous rassemble cet après-midi. Vous l'avez compris, Madame, l'Université de Paris est fière de vous recevoir aujourd'hui pour ce moment d'échange avec ses étudiants. Et c'est au nom de tous ces maîtres et de ces étudiants que je vous remets maintenant la grande médaille de la Sorbonne en vous disant tout notre bonheur de partager avec vous ce beau moment d'amitié et de liberté.
Merci à vous, Monsieur le Recteur. Une parole de bienvenue aussi de la ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la Recherche qui va nous rejoindre, Geneviève Fioraso. Elle arrive à la tribune pour prononcer donc ce discours de bienvenue pour Aung San Suu Kyi. Madame la ministre, c'est à vous.
Madame, chère Aung San Suu Kyi, Monsieur le Recteur de Paris, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de France en Birmanie, Monsieur l'ambassadeur pour les droits de l'homme, Mesdames, Messieurs les directeurs, chers étudiants, Madame, c'est un honneur et une très grande fierté de parler devant vous. Vous arrivez aujourd'hui presque au terme de votre visite sur Paris et plus largement de votre séjour en Europe que vous avez voulu placer, et je vous en remercie, sous le signe de la jeunesse et du débat démocratique. C'est pour nous un immense plaisir de vous recevoir au cœur du quartier latin, quartier historique de la jeunesse de Paris. Votre parcours exceptionnel trouve ici un écho particulier dans ce grand amphithéâtre de la Sorbonne, lieu prestigieux de savoir et de débat. Quel symbole magnifique pour une femme si longtemps privée de liberté et du souffle de vie que donne la culture. Je sais que vous avez beaucoup lu pendant vos années d'enfermement, que vous connaissez de nombreux auteurs de langue française, avec une passion particulière pour Victor Hugo et, je crois, les romans policiers de Georges Simenon. Je salue la présence nombreuse d'étudiants de différents horizons, notamment de la Sorbonne, mais aussi de l'Institut d'études politiques de Paris, et je salue son directeur par intérim, de l'Institut national de langues et civilisations orientales, je salue son directeur, l'un des très rares établissements d'Europe où la langue et la culture birmane sont enseignées. Vous avez souhaité, Madame, ce moment d'échange, et tous sont là pour vous. Et je pense que certains auraient voulu être là, mais n'ont pas pu être là, faute de place. Je ne vais donc pas parler longtemps, car je sais combien ce moment privilégié restera gravé dans leur mémoire, dans vos mémoires, à jamais. Nous sommes particulièrement sensibles à votre engagement en faveur de la jeunesse. Je suis à cet égard tout à fait honorée que vous ayez accepté d'être la marraine de l'Institut français de Birmanie. La France est fière d'avoir pu maintenir à Rangoon, durant toutes ces années, ce lieu d'ouverture culturelle et de débat d'idées pour les jeunes, dans un contexte qui offrait si peu d'occasions de s'exprimer librement. L'Institut français, qui a pendant longtemps été le seul centre culturel du pays à offrir une programmation artistique régulière et de qualité, est devenu, au fil du temps, un espace d'expression incontournable pour de nombreux artistes et étudiants birmans. La France est honorée par votre présence et vous remercie. Elle a toujours été à vos côtés car les valeurs pour lesquelles vous vous battez sont particulièrement chères à notre cœur. Malgré les privations, les humiliations, vous n'avez cessé d'appeler au dialogue, à la justice et à la réconciliation entre toutes les composantes de la nation birmane. Ces objectifs, ces valeurs sont aussi les nôtres. L'ouverture que connaît à présent la Birmanie nous permet d'espérer. Nous demeurons plus que jamais à l'écoute de votre analyse de la situation et de vos attentes à l'égard de la communauté internationale. Nous avons notamment conscience que la formation des jeunes, dans tous les domaines, est un défi vital pour l'avenir de la Birmanie. En tant que ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la Recherche, je veux vous assurer de toute mon écoute et toute ma détermination à ce sujet, et j'en prends l'engagement ici, devant vous, à la Sorbonne. Vous avez déclaré récemment que votre voyage en Europe était celui de la découverte et de la redécouverte en regardant le monde avec des yeux neufs. Le monde a forcément beaucoup changé depuis le jour où vous avez appris, depuis votre maison de Rangoon, que le prix Nobel de la paix vous avait été décerné avec l'approbation du monde entier. Le monde de la science est un monde de femmes et d'hommes passionnés. C'est un monde fait de doutes, de détermination, de patience, d'exaltation, de solitude et de partage d'échecs et de succès. Tout au long de votre parcours pour la liberté, vous avez sans doute connu tous ces sentiments contradictoires et votre soif de connaissance et de découverte fait de vous une très grande chercheuse. L'exemplarité de votre démarche est un modèle pour nous tous. La présence de tous ces jeunes, étudiantes et étudiants autour de vous, restera sans doute une image forte de votre séjour en France. Il est des personnalités hors du commun qui redonnent sens à nos actions et à nos vies. Vous êtes l'une d'entre elles. Je laisse maintenant la place aux étudiantes et aux étudiants. L'université est universelle, votre combat est universel. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci à vous, Madame la Ministre. Nous allons commencer cette séance de questions-réponses dans un instant, mais je crois que vous souhaitez, Aung San Suu Kyi, prendre la parole à ce pupitre. On m'a dit que vous souhaitiez faire un petit discours à la Sorbonne, donc je vous en prie, rejoignez ce pupitre. Tous les étudiants qui sont ici et les autres vont se faire un plaisir de vous accueillir et de vous écouter.
Thank you very much for your very enthusiastic and warm welcome. I actually would have liked to have been brave enough to say a few words in French, but with so many people, I've been terrified. So I'll just say what I have to say in English, and I'm sure most of you understand it, but I think there were probably interpretation for those who don't. As I was listening to the minister speaking about my years under house arrest, it occurred to me that one of the things that helped me to pass those years with equanimity was my curiosity. I was always wanting to know more about what is happening to the world around me and to myself as well. And however small the world may be, even if it is confined to one house or even one room, there is always something of interest going on. And because of this interest, I never felt that I was not free. I have sometimes felt somewhat unreal because I was not in contact with the rest of the world, but I never felt that I was not free because my mind was free to think and to think about new things. Every day it seemed to me that there were new things to think about. And I practiced meditation during those years, and this teaches you a lot about yourself. You should try just sitting very quietly for about 20 minutes and not thinking. It's very difficult not to think. And then you realize what your mind is really like. And little by little, because you know more about yourself, you are most sensitive to what is going on around you. And of course, I was lucky enough to have a radio to listen to and books to read. All of us need inner resources at some time or the other. If you're lucky, you may not have to depend on them too much. But if circumstances around you are such that your life is restricted in certain ways, then you have to fall back on your inner resources. And I think that's what education should be about, to build up your inner resources so that in whatever circumstances you may find yourself, you will be able not just to survive, but to grow. Because life is about growing. It's not about remaining static. It's about learning new things every day, even if there's something about yourself or something about the room in which you are forced to be. So I hope that all of you today will help me to learn new things in the next hour and a half. I think we have an hour and a half left, or perhaps less. And that the questions that you ask me will help me to ask questions about our situation in Burma. Because questions lead to other questions. Some have asked me, aren't you bored with people asking you the same questions again and again? It's not quite like that. People put their questions in different ways. And sometimes even the same questions can provoke new insights into the issue that they are addressing. So I look very much forward to the questions that you will put to me, and I hope that they will be as interesting for you as I'm sure your questions will be to me, that my answers will be as interesting as your questions will be to me. Thank you.
Voilà, merci à vous. Une toute petite question de ma part. Je promets que je vais laisser la parole à tous les gens qui sont ici, les jeunes qui sont là et puis la salle ensuite. Première question pour vous demander ce que vous ressentez. Est-ce que vous avez été surprise, puisque vous bouclez quasiment votre voyage en France ici à la Sorbonne, de l'accueil que vous avez pu recevoir partout en France, j'allais dire même partout en Europe, et particulièrement aussi ici à la Sorbonne, de la part de jeunes étudiants?
Is this working?
Yeah.
Yes. I have been surprised, and very pleasantly so, that it's not just people in France, but people from everywhere else in the world who happen to be in France, who have been so supportive and who seem to be so involved in what we're doing in Burma. But I think mainly I'm always surprised at how many young people are interested, because I had been told that in the wealthier countries, young people are no longer interested in political and humanitarian issues. And I hope this is not so, and from looking at you, I do not think this is so.
Alors, ça n'est pas le cas. Effectivement, des jeunes de Sciences Po, de la Sorbonne et de l'INALCO sont avec nous. L'INALCO, c'était les Langso avant. Première question à San Suu Kyi, qui prend la parole?
Charlotte Ruffin, je suis étudiante à l'INALCO. Vous n'étiez pas venue en Europe depuis 1988. Avez-vous l'impression que beaucoup de choses ont changé ici?
Fundamentally, I don't think too many things have changed. When I was in England, the first thing I noticed was how much cleaner it was. And of course, it's a change for the better. It also, I think, reflects the fact that, in fact, Europe is wealthier now than it was more than 20 years ago. I know it has been going through tremendous economic problems, but in fact it is wealthier. Young people, of course, may not know this because they've only lived at a time when the West has become much more affluent than it used to be. And also, I'm aware of the closer links between Europe and the rest of the world. When I was a student at Oxford, I was the only Burmese in the whole city, in the university as well as in the whole city. But now at Oxford, I find there are quite a number of young Burmese, not all of them students at the university, but people who live there, who are studying in language schools and in the Polytechnic and so on. So the world has become smaller, and therefore we have become closer to one another.
Virginie Troy de la Sorbonne. Mes enfants m'ont demandé ce matin, demande à Aung San Suu Kyi si elle n'était pas trop triste, seule dans sa grande maison. Pardonnez mon émotion, mais j'étais très près de votre demeure à Rangoon et je vous ai senti enfermée. Et pour moi, c'est incroyable de vous voir aujourd'hui libre à Paris. Donc, je voulais tout simplement vous demander dans cette visite qui est très riche d'objectifs officiels et d'émotions, de souvenirs, pourquoi cette visite à la Sorbonne vous tenait tant à cœur?
First of all, I think I'll have to be quite honest and say that there were very few times when I felt sad. Now, you may ask why I didn't feel sad. In a sense, I think sadness was not an option. you should not give way to sadness. And if you keep yourself as occupied as I kept myself, you had no time to be sad. I set a very strict timetable, which involved getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And if you get up at 4:30 in the morning, you feel annoyed rather than sad. And then the rest of the day is filled with work. And the weekends I would keep as holidays. So during the weekends, I would not stick to a strict timetable. And those days became rather happy for me. Today I don't have to work according to a strict timetable. I can do whatever I like. I can sit and read detective stories the whole day if I like. Whereas during the week, I would set myself a time for reading economics, for reading politics, and so on. So because I kept myself so busy, I did not feel sad. But coming out here, I'm very pleased to feel that many people have felt for me during those years that I was alone. And in retrospect, they seem even less sad than they might have been.
Alors, on va peut-être maintenant parler d'avenir, parce que vous êtes aussi une femme d'avenir. On parle beaucoup de votre passé, mais je sais que vous regardez toujours en avant, avec d'autres questions de la part de nos étudiants.
Mingalaba, that's an Indian word in Burmese, I know. I'm just going to present myself in English, and I have to ask a question in French. My name is Samuel Kling, and I'm studying at Sciences Po. Ma question, c'est n'avez-vous pas peur que le mouvement démocratique en Birmanie repose trop sur le fait que vous soyez une icône?
I don't think so. I think my stage is based on the power of the democratic movement in Burma, because this is supported by our people. For example, until the by-elections in April, I think there were still those who thought that the movement in Burma was very restricted to a few activists. But the support that we received from the people during the campaign showed that they were behind it. Without the people behind us, the movement could not have survived. We would have been forgotten if the people were not there to keep our memory alive. And of course, also international organizations and other countries which believed in democracy and human rights helped to keep our movement alive. The people in Burma have been much encouraged by the perception that the rest of the world cared and that we were not alone. But certainly I'm not the only one who's keeping the movement in Burma alive, and I hope that this is not what people will continue to think.
Justement, quand on vous compare à Mandela ou quand on vous compare à Gandhi, quand on dit de vous que vous êtes une icône, est-ce que quelque part ça vous dérange? Comment vous vous définissez, vous, quand vous parlez de vous?
Well, this icon business is a bit puzzling, because I would have always thought that I was much too active to be considered an icon, which I always think of sitting there and just smiling in a very saintly way. And I'm no saint, by the way. You must get rid of the idea that I'm a saint. I always dislike being referred to as a saint. I'm not like Nelson Mandela either. We are two different types of people. I admire him greatly, and I hope that our movement will meet with the kind of success that the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa has had. We always learn from other movements. We learned a lot from the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. We learned a lot from what happened in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in places such as South Korea, Indonesia, South America. We learned from all parts of the world. This in itself shows that everywhere in the world there is this instinct that carries us towards freedom and towards the light of openness. And I think this is what we share with others who have been regarded as icons, but whom I think are really more fighters than icons.
Alors, Camille Veur de l'INALCO, dans votre jeunesse, comment vous êtes-vous constitué votre idéal politique?
I was brought up in a democratic country because Burma became independent in 1948, and we became independent as a democracy. We had parliamentary democracy, not perfect, mind you, but it was one of the best in our region. And Burma at that time was also considered one of the nations in Asia most likely to succeed. We had a good education system. In spite of the fact that Burma had suffered greatly during the war,
We had a good education system, we had a good health service, we had a civil service that was efficient and clean. That is to say, it was not corrupt. So I grew up with great pride in my own country. And a lot of my father's old soldiers who used to tell me stories when I was small always made me think that there were only 3 countries in the world that mattered. There was Burma, there was Japan, and there was England. And we got rid of the Japanese, we got rid of the English, so we were capable of getting rid of anybody who oppressed us. So this is the way I was brought up, to have full confidence in our ability to gain freedom for ourselves, and in a sense, to take democratic rights for granted, in the sense that I thought that everybody was entitled to democratic rights. And I was fortunate because military rule became entrenched in Burma only after I had left it. And these perceptions were never changed by the repressive regime under which the country had to live for so many years.
Bonjour, merci d'être ici. Nicolas Salem de l'INALCO. Vous venez de parler d'éducation et vous avez plusieurs fois souligné que l'éducation était une priorité pour l'avenir de la Birmanie. J'ai donc une question sur le développement de l'éducation privée qui existe déjà en Birmanie et qui semble appelé à se développer. Est-ce que vous n'avez pas peur qu'un système à 2 vitesses se mette en place avec un fossé grandissant entre ceux qui peuvent et ceux qui ne peuvent pas accéder à l'éducation privée? Pensez-vous que l'État doit demeurer l'acteur principal de l'éducation primaire et secondaire du pays?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's already a gap. The very, very few privileged who can go to good schools, very expensive schools such as the international school, and the great majority of the Burmese people who go to the state schools, or the state-run schools, which do not really teach you much. And even those schools, not all our children go there. 15% of Burmese children do not go to school at all. And of those who do go to school, only about 20% manage to finish high school, or less than 20%. So you can see that the great majority of Burmese people have no access to an adequate education, while the very privileged live in a totally different world. I have noticed with some concern lately in Burma that those privileged children who go to the international school and other private schools, usually run by foreigners, have started thinking that it's something to be proud of not to speak Burmese. They are taught English in those schools and they talk to one another in English. And while I think you can be proud of mastering a foreign language, I don't think you should be proud of forgetting your own language. This is the kind of concern that I'm sure you are thinking about. So with the privatization of some schools in Burma, we need to improve the state education system, which is what the great majority of our young people will have access to. And by the way, I must mention vocational training because this is much needed in Burma. Those who have already completed their so-called education are not really able to earn a living. So we've got to be able to help them to do so.
Vous parliez à l'instant de ce qui reste à faire en Birmanie. Vous allez retourner dans votre pays dans quelques heures. Comment vous voyez votre rôle, vous, de député, puisque vous êtes nouvellement élu? Que reste-t-il à faire et en quoi y a-t-il urgence?
I have to keep reminding people that although my party is now the biggest opposition in the National Assembly, we are only 44. And altogether there are about 640 members in the 2 houses. So we're a very, very small opposition, nevertheless the biggest opposition group. There are other parties, particularly the ethnic nationality parties with whom we are on very good terms. And we hope to work together to promote democratic values. One of the first things that we would like to concentrate on is to make the legislative process more transparent, so people know what we are doing, what the Legislative Assembly is doing. So far, we have to wait until the laws are enacted before we know what's in them, which means that stakeholders are not able to make their input before the laws are the laws have been adopted. And of course, that means that if we want to amend anything, we'll have to go through a long process all over again. So as an MP, I would like to work not just at laws, but at the whole legislative process to make it more transparent, more democratic, and to work together with the other parties and to achieve consensus.
Je suis Diana Detsieva de Sciences Po et je voulais savoir, vous avez toujours été l'avocate fervente de la démocratie au Burma, mais récemment vous avez dû faire des compromis qui sont nécessaires et pensez-vous qu'il y en aura encore beaucoup à faire et que ressentez-vous face à ces compromis qui sont peut-être nécessaires?
Democracy is about compromises, after all, because democracy means rule of the people, and everybody can't rule. So we have, democracy usually means, in many countries, either the will of the majority or consensus. So that both requires compromise. If you accept the will of the majority, also that's a compromise, because you're not accepting everybody's point of view, which you cannot. And I hope that our compromises are the sort which will take us closer to stronger and lasting democratic institutions. It depends on the kind of compromises that you make. Compromise in itself is not bad. It depends on whether you're compromising on principles or on tactics and strategies. Of course, if it's a compromise which will involve giving up your democratic principles, then you should not engage in it.
Une autre question? Allez-y, je vous en prie.
Minglaba, je suis Kwanka Sankapantanon de l'INALCO. Puisque la Birmanie va présider l'ASEAN en 2014 et qu'elle va rejoindre l'AEC en 2015, quelles vont être les conséquences pour la Birmanie et quels sont les changements attendus par la jeunesse birmane?
I don't think just by joining ASEAN, Burma is going to change greatly. It depends very much on what ASEAN demands of Burma. And ASEAN in general is it's not over-demanding of its members. I think that it can do a lot to help us by insisting that Burma adheres to certain standards. As for the young people of Burma, what they will benefit from joining ASEAN depends very much on how the increased engagement with ASEAN will affect their everyday life. Is it going to mean greater economic opportunities for them? Is it going to mean greater educational opportunities for them? At the moment, we cannot say. We have to wait and see. But I don't think we wait and see in the sense of doing nothing and waiting for the situation to develop. I think we work towards what we want to see.
On continue, on va peut-être parler des minorités, ou peut-être avez-vous une autre question?
J'avais juste une question à propos des sociétés civiles. Avez-vous l'impression qu'il y a un mouvement en marche en Birmanie et cela concerne aussi les ONG internationales? On sait que pendant le cyclone Nargis, ça a été très dur pour les ONG internationales d'intervenir.
I think I've lost the interpreter. Okay. And since I was trying to listen to her, I couldn't listen to you as well.
I was speaking about the civil society. Do you have the feeling it's moving at the moment in the country? And do you think also the international NGOs will be more accepted to work, especially in case of emergencies?
I'm not quite sure what people mean in Burma now by civil society organizations. I would actually quite like somebody to explain to me the difference between CSOs and NGOs, because there has been a lot of talk about CSOs, and of course NGOs we've had for some time in Burma, particularly since Cyclone Nargis. But CSOs are something new. And I wonder what people mean exactly by civil society organizations. Is it just organizations which are not registered as NGOs? So I would like somebody to elucidate me on this. What is the difference between a CSO and an NGO in practice? Of course, in theory, we know there's a difference. But looking at the CSOs and NGOs in Burma, I am not really sure what the difference is. Could you explain it to me?
No, I was speaking about the civil society, the association inside Burma, the Burmese organization are they developing at the moment? Do you think things are made easier for them at the moment? And in parallel, is there also an easier access for international associations or NGOs to work so they can be in contact and work more closer together?
Well, NGOs have to be registered officially. So it means that in some ways NGOs can operate only with the compliance of the government, because the government can withhold registration. There are NGOs which have been operating without being registered, but of course their activities are limited to a certain extent. So when you talk about civil society organizations, civil society as a whole, we can say is developing, because we do have our political parties and we do have our monks who are very much on the side of the people as a whole. And we have many people interested in the environment and in the promotion of education. But I sometimes wonder how we can define civil society. This is why I mentioned it just now, civil society organizations, and how we differentiate them from the non-governmental organizations, because there's a vagueness about these two in Burma today.
On va aborder le problème des minorités. On est un peu rattrapé par l'actualité. On a lu que ces dernières semaines, pendant votre voyage d'ailleurs, il y avait des émeutes dans la province d'Arakan. La tension est extrêmement vive entre les bouddhistes et les musulmans. On dit aussi beaucoup sur les réseaux sociaux, notamment, que le pouvoir attise ces affrontements entre les différentes communautés. Est-ce que c'est aussi votre avis, ou est-ce que c'est un problème plus profond que cela?
Oh yes. The problems in the Rakhine state, of course, go back many, many years, because there have been tensions in the past between the Muslim population and the Buddhist population. The communal difficulties in the last few weeks have been very bad, and I do think there is some kind of instigation, not necessarily on the part of the government itself or on the part of particular groups, but I am aware that there are those who are not trying to bring about harmony, but trying to fan people's feelings of grievances, trying to make them to deepen their feelings of grievances, which is not going to help us to find a solution to the problem. Now, I think that there are, I've been talking about this very often because people have been asking me about these problems. There are two aspects to the troubles in the Rakhine. There are the religious and cultural aspects, which will take a long time to sort out, because you can't change people's religious and cultural values overnight. And to bring harmony between different religions, different cultures, that will need time. But I'm trying to emphasize the need for diffusing the situation by concentrating on the rule of law. That is to say, by making sure that the citizenship laws are just and of internationally acceptable standards, and that these are applied justly and fairly across the board. Now, I don't think this is something about which people can be complacent in Burma. We are not happy about rule of law in our country. By concentrating on the rule of law, it will not remove all the problems in the Rakhine instantly, but I think it could diffuse the situation.
Pardon, d'autres questions peut-être sur l'économie, ou allez-y, je vous en prie.
Camille Vert, INALCO, comment améliorer et pacifier les relations entre le gouvernement birman et les minorités?
I do not think development, even economic development or any other kind of development, can be a substitute for democracy. This is something that we have been saying for a long time. People want to preserve their sense of identity. And this does not have anything to do with economic development. If you look at Europe, for example, if you look at the Scots in England, they are doing very well economically. They have been part of the United Kingdom for many years, but there is still a sense that they would like to assert their own identity as Scots. It is very normal and natural for people to want to preserve their own identity. And I think that Burma needs to be a true union which recognizes and respects the aspirations of the different ethnic nationalities. This, the ethnic nationalities themselves have repeated
very often. The military regime for many years tried to disseminate the perception that federalism meant right to secession, which of course it doesn't mean at all. And we as the National League for Democracy have been trying very hard to make people understand that federalism simply is a division of powers between the central government and the regional or state governments, whatever you may call him, in accordance with the constitution accepted by all. So I do not think development is going to be the only answer. We have to have a political settlement that will be acceptable to all ethnic nationalities.
Une question sur l'éducation et les minorités. Il semble que l'enseignement des langues minoritaires dans les écoles publiques va faire son retour très prochainement. C'est une question particulièrement complexe, avec des enjeux à la fois éducatifs et politiques. Pensez-vous qu'un système scolaire de type fédéraliste, avec des composantes locales au niveau primaire, soit souhaitable et possible à mettre en place?
Question pointue. Mais très bonne question.
Mais intéressante.
I think the ethnic nationalities should be allowed to preserve and nurture their own languages. At the moment, they're not allowed to teach their own languages in schools. I think we will have to have a main language, or possibly two, because in these days, you really cannot get by without English, wherever you may be. So I think English and Burmese will have to be taught. But I think they should be able to teach their own languages as well in the ethnic nationality regions. Federalism, there are many types of federalism. So I do not think that federalism will mean greater trouble if the constitution is such that everybody is confident that federalism does not mean secession. The ethnic nationality parties have said repeatedly that they do not want secession. That is not the kind of federalism they are working towards. And I think we all need to understand this.
Alors, on va parler économie. Vous êtes ici en France, vous avez fait un tour d'Europe. En quoi l'Europe peut-elle vous aider dans les années qui viennent? Est-ce que si des aides économiques sont envisagées effectivement, elles doivent être assujetties à la progression de la démocratie dans votre pays?
Of course, economics means investments in many ways, because the other kind of aids would be development aid, humanitarian aid, which usually go through governments or international organizations. But if we're looking at it purely from the point of view of the economy, then we'll have to look at investments. I have spoken of democracy-friendly, human rights-friendly investments. Practically speaking, this means that we should encourage businesses investing in Burma to adhere to codes of best practices, particularly with regard to financial transparency. And I've been repeating this, particularly with regard to the extractive industries, because these are the industries in which many, many foreigners are interested in Burma. We have tremendous natural resources, and we do not want to be dissipated. Our natural resources have been a problem to us. We have, in a sense, suffered from the resources curse, because this has enabled the military regime to survive without the support of the people. And we've got to get out of the syndrome of the natural resources curse by taking a responsible attitude towards investment in those areas, in particular. But in every area, we would like to encourage businesses to sign up to codes of best practices.
Beaucoup de spécialistes ont vraiment dit beaucoup de choses sur les possibilités économiques du Burma. Mais vous, comment envisagez-vous vraiment le développement économique du pays? Et surtout, quel est le secteur le plus prometteur qui devrait être mis en avant aujourd'hui au Burma?
There are tremendous possibilities in Burma. The potential is great. But I think it's a matter of how we prioritize them. Because we need some short-term results. Because people are so poor and people are doing so badly. We need their lives to improve as quickly as possible. Of course, there are other sectors which will take longer to develop. I mean, this is why people talk of low-hanging fruit. The sectors where the returns will be quicker and we will be able to feel a change in our own lives. There is great interest in the tourist industry.
And this is considered one of the low-hanging fruits because there's so many tourists poised to come into Burma and we do not have enough facilities. And if we were to be able to train up young people to work in the tourist industry, this would mean early job creation. And this could mean a change in the lives of many people. And also, we want to encourage those kind of businesses which will take responsibility for some of the infrastructure in our country. When I was elected in April to my township, I met members of my constituency and asked them what they wanted most, what their priorities are. And the first they mentioned was good roads, communications. The roads are so bad that during the monsoons they practically disappear. And children cannot go to schools in other villages because it would take them too long to wade through the muddy lanes, and by the time they get to school, it's almost time for the school to be over. And it makes economic life also very difficult. And I asked them what's the second one, because roads, to construct roads is not so easy for us as a political party. It is water. It's things as basic as that. That was easier for us in the sense that we could start digging wells for them and repairing ponds and water tanks. So there's a great need for the kind of investment which will help us with the basic needs of the people as well. So these have to be quick in returns. But then there will be others which will take longer. So it's a matter of prioritizing. There are so many possibilities in Burma that it's almost frightening, and this is what is worrying, that people are so eager to go in because they want to have first refusal, if you like, that I sometimes am worried that they will not think enough about the consequences of the way in which they invest.
Vous parliez de la richesse de votre pays qui peut se relever en partie seul, vous parliez aussi des investissements qui sont nécessaires. Je crois qu'il y a une question que quasiment tout le monde ici se pose dans cet amphithéâtre, en tout cas c'est une question qui nous est beaucoup revenue. Tout le monde s'interroge et se demande ce qu'il peut faire à son propre niveau pour aider la Birmanie aujourd'hui à progresser vers la démocratie.
Well, as France, of course, I would like you to urge France, that is to say your government, to support the initiative for financial transparency, which the European Commission is considering, which would be a very good one, because it would be project by project, and all companies, and if this were adopted by the European Parliament, all companies, all businesses which are registered with the stock exchanges in Europe would have to adhere to these codes. So I would like you to do that in a very practical sense, that you persuade France to support this initiative and get it through as quickly as possible. So companies like Total, I've been asked about Total very often, will also have to adhere to that code of financial transparency. And this will help our situation a great deal and ensure that investment does not go to the wrong people. We don't want new investments going to the same old people. We don't want new opportunities open to us to empower the same old people who have had authority over the country for the past few decades.
Bonjour, Samuel Kling, Sciences Po. J'ai une question donc, en rapport avec ce développement économique. Et, quel est votre sentiment sur la sincérité de l'armée? Ne vous pensez-vous pas que les compromis, comme là c'est plutôt négatif, sur la scène politique sont un moyen pour les militaires d'augmenter leur pouvoir économique? Et je me base sur plusieurs articles que j'ai lus avec la libéralisation s'accompagnait de la distribution d'entreprises à des amis des militaires. Et donc, ne pensez-vous pas qu'une partie des sanctions ont été levées? Vous ne pensez pas que les militaires vont rebondir sur l'aspect économique?
Well, this is exactly what I was saying, that you must watch who is getting the new opportunities, who are getting the new contracts, where are the investments going. This is the need for transparency. Sometimes we discover only after the contracts have been signed and sealed and made legal that these contracts were even in the pipeline, as it were. We don't know anything about what's happening when there's no transparency. But if we knew, for example, that a particular company was thinking of linking up with a particularly nasty crony before they were able to complete their agreements, then we have a lot of time in which to point out that this is not acceptable. And especially if it's a Western company and they have signed up to codes of best practices, we can do a lot to prevent the cronies from getting richer and richer and more powerful. But I must also emphasize the fact that there are cronies and cronies. I've been having to explain this, because just because you got rich under the military regime does not necessarily make you an enemy of the people. It's how you got rich and whether in the process of getting rich you actually hurt the freedoms and rights of others. Some cronies did that, some didn't. And I do not want our country to be captive to the past. We must go forward. We can't always be kept back by what has happened in the past. But on the other hand, we can't completely forget what has happened in the past, particularly if that is going to be carried along into the future.
J'entendais dans certaines de vos dernières déclarations que vous portiez certains espoirs dans la jeune génération des militaires qui arrivent maintenant. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer ces déclarations et quelle différence? C'est-à-dire qu'est-ce que vous les sentez plus ouverts à une démocratisation du pays dans les années à venir?
I think I would say that they're more open to international values, and this is something has, of course, a lot to do with computers and the internet and so on. The younger generation in the military have been more, are certainly a lot more IT literate than the older generation, and they have access to news to which their seniors did not have access. But on the other hand, we also have to be aware of the fact that some of the younger generation who are more electronically, technologically literate than their seniors might use their skills to preserve their special position in the country. So there are always pros and cons. But I think there is a greater likelihood of their opening up to other ideas. That's what young people are like. They like new ideas. They like finding out about what other people like them are doing in the rest of the world. And while some of them will continue to support and support their seniors and to preserve their entrenched position, I think a lot of them will open up.
Alors peut-être une question sur l'impunité, parce que certaines de vos déclarations aussi peuvent surprendre. On a le sentiment que la junte militaire vous a fait vivre des choses extrêmement éprouvantes, et pourtant vous dites qu'il ne faut pas forcément vouloir absolument punir ces militaires. Expliquez-nous ce que vous entendez par là.
Well, I've never really thought of punishing the military. I only think of that when other people start talking about it. Because what we have been doing is not about punishment. It is about improving the lives of people, not about punishing anybody. And it's not about vengeance. I've never felt vengeful. And if you ask me why, well, I don't think that I have been treated that badly compared to others. So I recognize the fact that those who have suffered more than I have may feel that the military should be brought to justice. But I don't think that we should give up the future of our country simply for the sake of wreaking vengeance on those who have made us suffer. But there has to be reconciliation. And reconciliation means facing the past as well. But there are different ways of facing the past. It does not mean that you have to punish others. It doesn't necessarily mean that facing the past means punishing people. We look to South Africa, of course, as an example, where it's very good for me to be able to quote Archbishop Desmond Tutu and to say that what we want is restorative justice and not retributive justice. But I think we have to face the past.
D'autres questions?
Bonjour, Julia Rebois, je suis étudiante à la Sorbonne. Donc, chez nous, une ministre aux droits des femmes vient d'être nommée. De grands chantiers vont être lancés sur l'égalité hommes-femmes, sur les questions de genre. Est-ce que vous pensez mettre en place, ou voyez-vous certaines choses qui vont être lancées chez vous sur ces questions-là?
Well, we would like to work for the rights of women, but the poor men in Burma don't have many rights either. So we've got to think of them as well. So this is why we're concentrating on human rights.
When I was at the World Economic Forum in Bangkok a few weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that there is gender discrimination in Burma, although a lot of people do not seem to be aware of it. They always talk about how independent the Burmese women are. And of course, we are in some ways. We've always taken a very active part in the economic life of our country, and daughters and sons inherit equally. So looking at it on the surface, it does not seem as though there were that much discrimination. But when you study the situation more closely, you will find that there is gender discrimination. A simple example, which I think students will be quick to understand. In order to enter the medical school in Burma, girls need higher marks than boys. I think this is because girls usually get higher marks than boys, and they don't want to keep all the boys out of medical school. But in any case, this is not fair. This is gender discrimination. And if we look at the government of Burma, there are 2 deputy ministers who are women. The rest are all men. But I was told recently that the government is making a move, since my speech, I mean, it have nothing to do with my speech, I don't know, to place some women ministers in the cabinet. And let us see.
Alors, on ne peut pas s'empêcher de vous poser la question, évidemment. Est-ce que, dans la droite ligne de ce que vous êtes en train d'entreprendre au niveau politique, puisque vous avez été élu député en avril, vous envisagez un jour, même si pour l'instant la Constitution vous l'interdit, puisque vous avez des enfants qui vivent à l'étranger, diriger votre pays, la Birmanie?
I'm a little bit wary of the word rule, because I don't think this is quite acceptable in a democracy. I think if you mean simply that, do you think I could be the head of government of Burma, I think this will depend very much on the will of the people. And I think every leader of every political party in a democracy should think that he or she will be able to head a government. Otherwise, they are not serious about democracy.
Donc, vous y pensez?
Oh yes, we have to think about it. It would be very stupid of me not to think about it when so many people keep asking me about it.
La prochaine étape, juste pour qu'on se remette le calendrier politique, je crois que les prochaines élections, c'est en 2014, c'est ça, dans votre pays?
Oh no, the next step is now. I keep saying that we cannot wait until 2015 to find out which way Burma is going. It is now that we must decide which way Burma should go.
Est-ce que quand, justement, vous avez ces paroles extrêmement décidées, on le voit, dans le changement démocratique de votre pays, vous regardez tout ce qui s'est passé, je pense, vous parliez tout à l'heure de l'Afrique du Sud, mais je pense beaucoup plus proche de nous, à la fois dans le temps et géographiquement. Est-ce que vous avez regardé la manière dont se sont déroulées les révolutions arabes, par exemple? Voilà, et est-ce que ça vous inspire dans ces révolutions qui ne sont pas toujours bien passées? Vous espérez, j'imagine, autre chose pour votre pays?
The Arab Spring is an inspiration to us in the fact that so many young people were involved. And this makes us feel that young people everywhere want more freedom and they want a more open society. But the Arab countries are very different from Burma. I think we have one advantage over many of the Arab countries which have partaken of the Arab Spring, that we have had an opposition party for a long time, for over 20 years. Yes, we were terribly repressed. Yes, we were not able to exercise our rights as a political party. We were not even allowed to open offices. Most of our offices were closed down. We were not allowed to recruit new members. But in spite of that, we managed to survive. And I think this is the main difference. And we are, I think we can claim to be a liberal, moderate opposition. And this is a good augury for the future of democracy in Burma.
Peut-être une dernière question de nos étudiants, sinon le dialogue va s'engager. Je vous en prie, allez-y.
Donc bonsoir, Dosu. Ma question serait un peu plus personnelle. En fait, heureusement, vous n'avez jamais cessé votre combat. Mais pendant les différentes années où vous avez été assiégé à résidence, est-ce qu'il y a eu un moment où vous avez senti que vous étiez seul ou que vous alliez peut-être pas arriver à mener votre combat, c'est-à-dire d'être abandonné soit par les politiciens, soit même par la population birmane?
No, there were times during those years when I've mentioned this in my Nobel speech. When I didn't feel quite real. Mind you, there have happened many times during this journey when I didn't feel quite real. But it's because you seem to be working in a different way from other people around you. But I never despaired. I never thought that I would like to abandon our cause. I would think of some of my colleagues in prison, and it occurred to me that even if there were just one person like some of them, it would be worth fighting for. Just one person would be enough. I think it was a young girl from Egypt who asked me in London, at a meeting in London, whether I agreed with those who said that some people do not deserve democracy, that some countries do not deserve democracy. And I explained to her that in my opinion, even if there's just one person in that country who believes in the dignity of the human being, they deserve democracy.
Peut-être juste un mot sur ce que vous avez ressenti quand vous avez reçu votre prix Nobel qui vous avait été attribué 20 ans avant. Dites-nous ce que vous avez ressenti, puis ensuite on va donner la parole à la salle, parce que ça fait 1 heure maintenant que les étudiants vous posent des questions.
Well, when I heard about the news, I wasn't particularly surprised because I'd been hearing on the radio that I was one of the front runners, and it didn't really strike me very strongly at that moment. Perhaps because I was feeling sleepy. I think the news came over in the evening on the BBC. But it was later, slowly, it came home to me how important it was for our cause, not just for me alone, but for our cause, that the Nobel Prize had been awarded to me. It focused the attention of the world on our struggle in Burma, and I knew then that we were not going to be forgotten.
Alors, on va donner la parole à la salle. Je sais que beaucoup d'entre vous souhaitent poser des questions. Ce ne sera pas possible pour tout le monde. Qui a le micro? Je ne sais pas. Alors, allez-y. Profitez-en. Demandez le micro si vous voulez poser une question. Quelqu'un ici, juste devant. Voilà. Allez-y, présentez-vous et posez votre question. Levez-vous, s'il vous plaît.
Bonsoir. Alors, ma question est aussi une question de prospective par rapport aux pays voisins. Comment vous voyez les relations entre une Birmanie qui va devenir démocratique et d'autres pays voisins qui sont peut-être plus autoritaires dans leur régime?
I suppose you are thinking of China because we have many neighbors. We have India, we have Bangladesh, we have Laos, and we have Thailand. I have to keep reminding people that Burma has always had very good relations with China. When we were practicing democracy, we were one of the first countries to recognize the communist government of China in the early 1950s. And throughout our very short term as a democratic country, we maintained those good relations. So I think that, I'm confident that we will be able to maintain good relations with China even when we're a democracy. With regard to our other neighbors, I would like closer relations with them. When I was in Thailand a few weeks ago, I was very gratified to find how much the Thais regarded me as one of them and how warm and how supportive they were. So I would like much closer, warmer ties with our neighbors.
Alors, pardonnez-moi, je vous presse un peu, mais Aung San Suu Kyi doit partir impérativement dans quelques minutes, donc encore 2 questions, s'il vous plaît, de la salle.
Ici. Good evening, ma'am. My question is about hope. When you were under arrest, house arrest, knowing that your husband was leaving this world, your children were growing up far, very far from you, what gave you hope? What sort of light guided your everyday life? I remember a poem by Victor Hugo, who seems to have kept company with you all these years, that when love leaves you, hope fades away too. So, what gave you hope? Are you happy today? And are you ready to forgive? Nelson Mandela also said that forgiving liberates the soul. Are you ready to pay such a price today?
I've never thought that I had to forgive anybody. I once heard somebody say, I think it was in just some play or some film, I can't quite remember, when somebody asked him, could you have forgiven so-and-so? I think it was somebody saying, I can't forgive my wife. Had you been in my place, could you have forgiven her? And he said that the man who was asked said very simply, I'm not so high that I can say whether or not I forgive anybody. I'm not God. I cannot say I forgive. And on the other hand, I'm not so saintly that I can say I do not forgive. I feel very much like that. I'm not so saintly that I can say to anybody, I do not forgive. And I do not think I'm so high that I can say to anybody, I forgive. I don't think there's anybody who really needs my forgiveness in a big way. In small ways, maybe somebody who tramped on my foot or something, I may forgive. But in big ways, I do not think that I have anything to forgive anybody. And perhaps that has helped me, because I do not have any feelings of bitterness or resentment. I have never been deprived of hope. And in any case, I think hope is linked to hard work. I work very hard, and so do the other members of my party. And because we work very hard, we never lose hope.
Voilà, pardon, mais pour respecter l'emploi du temps de notre invité, une dernière question. Alors, qui a le micro? Je ne sais pas.
It's me. Yeah, here.
Là-bas.
My
Over
name
there.
is Najib Babakar from Sciences Po. And first of all, I congratulate you for your Nobel Award, and you certainly deserve it. I guess you've been asked and you've answered quite a lot of questions about the suffering and about the political plans that you have for Burma. My question is entirely different, and aside from what you're going to do for Burma, because I believe that there are dozens and thousands of other Aung San Suu Kyi which are imprisoned in the neighboring countries. So apart from your political and economical plans, are you going to continue the path of stepping away or support those other women or the men who are fighting for democracy and for the peace? Because concerning your neighboring countries as China, Pakistan, or Iran, or especially Afghanistan, we have so many that are actually step backward because there's nobody to support them, especially the female activists and the female political candidates. So my question would be that, apart from your political plans, what other step are you going to initiate to support other, as you, who are fighting for democracy and peace?
Well, so far I've been doing everything possible to support such people. I am not, of course, in a position to do too much, but whenever I'm asked to send messages of support or to join in conversations via Skype or via just a telephone to engage in discussions about the fate of people like that, I've always done so, as far as I'm able, or sent written messages. I do hope that there will come a time when I will be able to concentrate more on the wider world than on my own country, because I have learned during this trip how much the wider world has been helping us and how much it cares for us. And I think you have to return this. When so much compassion and so much understanding has been given to you, you must give in return. Otherwise, you betray the best in human nature. So I would like to do more.
Voilà, je vous remercie tous infiniment. Voilà, superbe. Venez, venez.